My name is Jackie Johnston. I'm a Rutgers University student, majoring in ecology, evolution, and natural resource. Tom?
We have another session starting, so if you need to have a conversation, please be respectful of the last speaker.
Thank you. Tom Purtell is a New Jersey licensed tree expert retained by Richview Consulting. His primary role is a part-time municipal arborist for the townships of Bloomfield and Montclair since 2018. Tom has recently conducted full tree canopy inventories for Maplewood, Springfield, and Verona townships. He also assists with assignments in Madison, Mount Olive, Glenridge, and South Orange. Tom is currently Vice President of the New Jersey Arborist Chapter of the International Society of Arboriculture. Today, Paul will be speaking about proper planning to avoid or minimize future pitfalls. Based on his 30 years in the arboriculture industry, Tom has made note of many problematic situations, which could have been avoided if better planning had been implemented. Tom will give you a glimpse of the regular issues townships' public works departments face when residents contact them with concerns. It is up to all of us to make good planning decisions so that we will not repeat mistakes of the past. And Tom will not be showing any graphs in his presentation this afternoon. And he is also an avid fisherman. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Tom Purtell.
Richview Consulting is Rich Wallowitz is the sole proprietor of that, and I've been fortunate enough to know Rich for 20 some odd years, and was able to stumble upon being able to help him out. And I have I'm an LTE. I'm also a pesticide application license. That helps a lot when you run into situations where there's problems with insects and diseases. The interesting thing that I find that I run into being the arborist for Montclair and Bloomfield is that it's part-time. It's only 1 day a week. It makes it really tough to try to get things taken care of. In Montclair, 15, 20 years ago, they had 15 or 16 folks on the crew. They chippers, stump grinders, all kinds of things. Now it's down to one foreman who's here in the audience, and it seems like all we do is run around and put out fires because there's not the funding available. Where the money for the 16 folks that used to make the town pristine, where'd it go? Okay, so makes my job really, really tough. It seems to be a case happening with a lot of towns. Like, for example, a lot of these towns that we've been involved with, they don't have full-time arborists. I'm not sure, are there any folks here that have a full-time arborist on their staff at all? As a 40-hour paid employee? Well, you, right. But Montclair has yes, he's actually the shade tree foreman. They hire myself as another set of eyes. So technically I'm a consulting arborist. Pat is also a certified arborist as well, so he does a bang-up job for the amount of information, of equipment and things he can deal with, okay? But if you notice, Jackie did say, I've done a couple inventories. The two towns of Bloomfield and Montclair, they don't have inventories. So it makes it really tough to try to manage things, okay? After you get a chance to drive around town for several years, you get a chance to really understand where things are and where some issues may be. A couple of days ago, I was 3/4 of the way through my presentation, took a break. I just do a quick side note here. Came back to look at my computer. My mouse pad is raised up about 5 inches, 5 credit card high, and you can see I had a battery problem. I've never had an issue with my laptop. I was panicked. I was thinking this thing was going to blow up in my face. I was going to lose all the work that I had done on PowerPoint and had to start from scratch. Luckily, I was able to put the jump drive in and get it through power. But When the airlines talk about lithium battery problems, they're not kidding. You know, you see it on TV once in a while with batteries on bikes and things like that, but just please be careful. You know, don't leave your battery plugged in unnecessarily. So, like the presentation, like with Walt and some of the other folks that do the work that we do, there's a lot of hats that we wear. I've done some GPS inventories. A lot of what I do driving around is windshield surveys, because as I'm going around and doing my stops, you see something, you stop, you write it down. Looking for hazardous trees. In the wintertime, when I used to worked for over 20 years in Bartlett, and when you first start, you run around looking for skeletons in the sky. Those are dead trees when you're a new guy and you're looking to try to get work. Another one of the big things that you have to drive around, especially now, are either ash and Atlantis. I get involved with the planting projects, tree removal, storm damage, vehicle damage, systemic pruning, you know, the standard stuff. What you find that you really need to understand with being on these commissions and helping out is all these infrastructure issues. I'm going to get into a couple of them, but some of these infrastructure issues you can make an entire presentation with. These are things, also another hat that you really don't want to wear, because if you're not one of these folks, don't try to be a landscape architect. Don't try to be an entomologist. It's fun to be a botanist and talk about it when you're talking to residents, but some of these other things, don't do it. Part of the planning process is the only way I can possibly keep any kind of sanity to my job is when I come in and I read my emails and voicemails, and Pat and I go over things that we think we have to go do. I'll take the addresses and try to map myself out. I find this is an easy way to do it. I know a lot of techno geeks could probably use MapQuest or your other programs to route yourself. So I start in one end of town and I just start ripping these, or the little posted arrows. One of the other things I really rely on a lot are these tools, because if you don't have the right tools and you go out there and you want to try to knock something off the list so you don't have to worry about it later, or the roll wheel. This is a Biltmore stick. I use this a lot. This is a rubber mallet. That's the old-fashioned way of checking to see how sound a tree may be. The only issue is you can only do it as far as you can reach. D-tape, and I go through cases of this stuff. Those are spray cans. One for either removals, and right now I'm in process of putting 325 trees in for Montclair in the next couple of weeks. So you go through a lot of white paint marking the curbs. Another little trick that I do with planting sites that may be behind parked cars is, Pat taught me this, is you take and put a white line out on the street just outside, so as the planting truck is coming down, instead of trying to look for the address, if he sees a fresh white line right there, the truck can stop, and it really makes searching, so it really makes your contractor a lot more efficient. And of course, the regular things of the pruners and Felcos, and when they're saying trying to get some time for yourself, I keep those in the car, but I never use them. Those are a fishing pole and golf clubs, so it was there more for humor. This is a really important thing to learn how to read. This is a tax map, and they really help resolve a lot of problems when you go to a property. There's a couple really interesting pieces of information that it gives you. Has anybody seen these on a regular basis or aware of them? Makes it a lot easier to be able to figure out things. So you've got the right-of-way, you've got the depth in the front of the property. The other thing, too, is the addresses, because sometimes you go up to houses, they don't have numbers anymore. Some people do, some people don't. You can't see them, or they're behind shrubs, so it makes it really tough. So this way, if you're looking to document something, you can use this as, okay, I know it's number 60 or 62. And also, there's an interesting thing that I kind of found out the hard way, is the distance of 150 feet doesn't start at the curb, it starts behind the sidewalk. And it can really change situations when you go to measure things and see where things are. One of the other things to document with is we were talking with a tree plotter and some of the other, iTree and the Davy software, and this is actually tree plotter that we use on occasion for things. So in a situation, I would love to be able to do every one of my stops in town for that. It's something that is contractually you have to set up between your forester and your DPW folks. So for example, just here, this is something very helpful. These are just ash trees in one park in Bloomfield Township. It was a tough decision because there has not been anything done with ash at all. And the decision was finally made to start taking them down because just because ash have leaves on them, there's some arguments that you can treat some of them and try to stabilize them. I'm glad I didn't because between the drought this past year and the decline, most of these trees now are only in third of its canopy remains. Easiest way to keep records, I use Excel because it makes everybody who's involved in the process be able to go to it and find problems or issues. So if you want to do the searches, the big thing are I do blue for prune and red for remove. This is actually what I do in Bloomfield Township. So it's just something easy. Again, so when I come back, I document it because otherwise you can't plan how many removals popped up the last couple of days or during your visit. Okay. At each of these conferences, if you just walk away with one thing that sticks, I had lunch with Paul Hurst from the Department of Agriculture, and he gave me an incredible amount of information on the spotted lanternfly. He designed it. So that's what these things are about. Don't be afraid when you sit down at lunch, there's somebody sitting there by themselves or a couple. Go sit down, you don't know who they are, and you're going to get a ton of information sometimes from folks. And maybe before you drive away from seeing what I'm going to show you next, and maybe you'll stop this from happening over and over and over again, because it seems like with older infrastructures, you run into a lot of the same problems. I found somebody who planted, I believe it's a crab apple. I've seen people put silver maples, whatever, right there. It was fun. Somebody must have saw it at Home Depot and got a good price on it. But what ends up happening is down the road, what if that was an oak tree or that silver maple? I'm not sure how old that was, been in the ground, but I'm sure it's a 60 or 80-year-old tree or more. It's mind-boggling. And that's the tree from the view. It's actually in a 24-inch planting belt. So that is one of these basic things. How many times do you hear about the right tree in the right place? You got to try to stick to some of these basic rules because, yeah, it's easy to put out a fire and give somebody a tree because you have one in the yard and you want to shut them up. This is what's going to happen down the road. Again, another one at a driveway. So what do you think the resident's going to ask you to do? Remove the tree, yeah. Fix. They want the town to fix the problem, no doubt about it. And they put it there, but I don't want it now. So, and then they say, well, my basement is flooding from sewage, so I definitely have to take it down. This is the 800-pound elephant in the room that I want to talk a little bit about a little later because this is an issue becoming a really big problem in towns that have old infrastructures. They're trying really hard to try to replace curbs and make the sidewalks ADA compliant and have nice new street lights and things like that. But below ground, there's a lot of issues going on. Mike Cifelli, who's on the board here at the Shade Tree Federation, is the administrator at Glenridge. He was part of that water main fiasco that happened in Essex County. And it was a 72-inch pipe that's, I don't know how many 100 years old. So sewer backups are not the town's problem. It sounds crazy, but sewer problems are from issues when old pipes start getting intrusion from roots. There are stories where roots will actually envelop the outside and hold an old pipe together. Because a lot of these old pipes are what's called Orangeburg pipe or clay pipes, where they are a male and female coupling that are, I don't know how long they are actually, but they're probably 6 or 8 inches in diameter. And as they shift and settle, the roots find the water. Plumbers will always blame the tree roots. My gut tells me it's not the tree roots, it's the degradation of the line. And because it's old, it's an easy way to say, yeah, let's take the tree down and we'll fix the problem. It's still going to be leaking. Every time you have your septic line or your line snaked with some of these old systems, that cutting blade, does anybody ever work for a plumber at all here? The cutting blades are very aggressive. So if you've got a line that's falling apart and chipping, every time you go to get it snaked out, it's only making the matter worse. It's kind of like taking sandpaper, and eventually, if you keep sanding something, you'll sand it away and it won't be around anymore. So, I'm sorry, I wanted to get back to this. So what Bloomfield Township does is what they'll actually give residents this material called Rudex. It's diclobonyl is actually the herbicide. It's an aquatic herbicide twice a year. And it's a foaming agent, and it kills fine roots. And they recommend that you have this done immediately after snaking it, and then use it twice a year. It will help tremendously with the amount of root intrusion in the pipes. Probably the best way to fix root intrusion altogether is just replace the line. But I'm hearing folks in, say, Bloomfield, in just a small house with, a 10-foot front yard to the sidewalk kind of thing, they're getting prices between $14,000 and $20,000 to replace the line from the house going out to the main. Because there's a lot involved. You may have to tear a porch off. You may have to take a big tree down. Where we'll be glad to do that if they're truly going to remove the line. Sometimes you have to get the tree down to do the excavation. So this stuff works really good. And sewer trucks, this is one of the most widely used chemicals in DPW departments, apparently, because the sewer trucks will use these to help clean and keep root intrusion down to a minimum. And this is another touchy one right here, is sidewalk repair. No. Does anybody work for a town here that sidewalks are repaired by the town? Or is it all it's all the residents' cost, right? You want to know, that aggravates so many people. I get so frustrated about hearing that on a regular basis. I can't take it personal though, but sometimes. I actually found this. I thought this was hilarious. It was a tree that was cut down, and the resident says, "Dear tree service technician, if all possible, could you remove the roots from underneath the sidewalk slab?" I'm like, really? It's not too easy to move a sidewalk slab. Here's another sidewalk. Would you have spent the money and had a mason do stamped concrete on a red maple that grows? The thing probably loves concrete. It must have had a special flavor because the color tasted good on the coloring that it is. I forget. I don't think that was in Montclair, Pat. I think that was in Bloomfield. That doesn't ring a bell. Then you're going to run into some people that are really upset. I didn't want the tree. So what they're going to do? They're going to cut the darn thing down. I drove down the street one day and saw this. I was livid. It was a beautiful fastigiate hornbeam in a property that had the service line. It was going to go right up in between the service lines with no interference whatsoever, and didn't want it. That's frustrating because it cost $500 to put the tree in, whatever the bid number was per tree. And then we got to go down now, and I'm surprised somebody hasn't gotten impaled in it, so we probably should take it down. But I just want to let the resident wait. You get residents do that. How many people see that on a regular basis? This one's actually not too bad. I think this tree survived because it looked like somebody used just a saw blade of a circular saw and not a chainsaw. Chainsaws are much more effective if you're going to do it. Trust me. So when people are giving you problems, the thing that don't panic or make up a story, because I find a lot of residents are lying. Imagine that. You know, it's really frustrating. And right away, some people are going to feel entitled because they sent you an email or a phone call, and in this new way of communicating, you send an email. If you don't get a response back in an hour, you know, you're a jerk. I'm not used to that kind of thing. I guess in the corporate world that's happened. And so, making a long story short, just assume you're going to have the resident, you're going to tell the resident, you'll get back to them if you don't know. Because a lot of townships already have ordinances and policies in place to help make some of these problems disappear. That's where these ordinances are really, really helpful. So make sure you understand them and know them, because the next town over may be completely different with a particular situation. So like what Walt was saying earlier, you're wearing the hat of a customer service agent. And a good place to tell folks to go is on Code E360. That's the website that is generally where you're going to find all of the towns that have ordinances. It's an easy way to go. Most of the websites on the town will have a click. Like, so for example, on Montclair, I forget exactly where it was that you click to go get it, and you can see it's all broken down with very distinct details of how the ordinance handles such things, like from replacements to enforcement violations. There are code enforcement officials in Montclair that can walk around if they see, or drive around, if they see a dead skeleton. Sometimes they will stop, make a note, and then contact Pat or I and take a look at it. This is another issue that I found really funny when people are calling up and basically lying. This resident said that every time it rains, it was the tree's fault, which is the Zelkova right here, that was flooding his basement and his garage. And that if we took the tree down, the problem would be solved. That's level right there. So that garage is what, 3 feet below grade? Yeah, you can't make it up, you know? So I'm not taking the tree down. I may go there one day and he may hire somebody and it'll be gone. And I won't be able to do it, because if it's not on camera, you can't prove it. Sometimes people are actually panicking because of good reason. All right, Norway maple, it's got a little bit of a weird lean to it. She said, I swear it's moving. Well, sure enough, it was. If you've ever seen pillowing is what roots do. They kind of like just grow right on the curb, and if they get wide enough, they'll actually ooze down like molten glass or liquid, okay? Well, this tree had lifted from a recent windstorm, because the tree was heading west and it was a nor'easter, and had pushed it and was lifting it up 4 to 5 inches. So that was an instant removal. So sometimes you got to listen to people, because there are people that are chronic complainers. And this brings us to a really interesting situation where a particular homeowner in Montclair was blaming her driveway issue on a street tree. And this is going back to where the tax map can really help you make you look and help the town to protect itself. That line there is the center of the street. That is the outer limit of the half of the, so it's 25 feet on a 50-foot right. That tree is 6 or 7 feet behind, and the resident was blaming us for all this degradation of the sidewalk. That's not from a tree. If you ever see what tree roots do to a sidewalk and pavement, they volcano. This is flat because it's water intrusion, or the old driveway wasn't prepared properly and somebody put on a really crappy 1-inch mix on top of it, and it's just freezing and thawing, or water is causing that off. So that really helped to arrest the problem, because this woman would literally call every 6 months. There's tree branches falling on my property. I want you guys to fix it. And it sprouts out on the bottom, and it's getting in the way. So I can't, this is something I don't want to really get too much involved with, but some of the costs to remedy some of these situations that the residents are going to confront you with are crazy. You know, first you got a tree plant, you got removal, sewer line cleanings. You know, this number, I was just trying to, that number could be 40, 50,000 bucks from damage from one tree, if you think about it, with all the crazy issues associated with it. So again, getting back to some of the basics, some of the details are real basics to get the right tree in the right location. In urban areas, this is a really big problem. In places like Holland Township and some of the other rural communities, most of these subdevelopments and our subdivisions are putting trees out in the lawn 10, 12, 14 feet because there's the room there. An 18-inch, I'm not even sure, this table here is probably 18 inches, this table. It's not a lot of room, and people want trees there. Then you've got to deal with overhead wires. Right? This is an ideal situation in a town. This is a 72-inch planting belt. Beautiful. Can't ask for anything better, but there's only like a quarter of a mile of this size in this whole town. And then you've got to deal with overhead wires. Dealing with the overhead wires, there's two really good places to get information from the tree list, and that's the New Jersey Tree Foundation, and PSC&G has a good source of trees that they prefer to have placed under wires. Try to use that. It's tough to get trees sometimes that qualify in this, but because so many people are now looking to get trees replaced. So you've seen this before, because if you can help the utility companies shave some costs, maybe our electric bills won't keep skyrocketing higher because they won't have to incur these kinds of costs behind the scenes. And the New Jersey Tree Foundation.org, there's printable resources. That's a really good place to go to get utility-friendly trees, big trees, and there's lists of trees that they've had really good success with in spring and fall digs too as well. A really good resource. I wanted to try to print one in, but I couldn't figure out how to get a PDF to copy and paste on this, so I'm not a PowerPoint expert. And this is another big one, call before you dig. No doubt about it, you have to do that, okay? Because you see this. I forget what town, I think this is in Kearney. I hope there's nobody from Kearney here. But you can see, there's a gas line. There's another one, I think that was Kearney also, right on top. This is why that call before you dig was instituted. I don't know how long ago it was. It was probably 28 or 30 years ago. It may even be more than that now. But you have to do that. And there's a really easy way to be able to do that when you're documenting your tree inventory. And this may be something that you want to consider on your tree inventory with regards to locations of trees, especially if you know down the road there are tree replacements coming in. If you already have, along with say 123 Main Street, have another column of something called the nearest cross street, and have that already that data already collected, so that when you go to pull and filter your 25 trees that you're going to plant, it's already there. So then you send it out for bid, and whatever contractor gets it, they have that, so that when they go to call for the markouts, that's fine. This is something just bugs the heck out of me, is putting a tree right over the top of a serious piece of infrastructure like that. But then some people don't care about their drains, and they never get cleaned out anyway. But that's probably why that tree got put there, is because it looked like that when the tree was put in. Call before you dig is not going to handle anything like this. Most towns, the irrigation systems aren't supposed to be out there because it's not their property, it's the township property. I believe it's actually against code in Montclair to have irrigation there, but everybody thinks they own it. So here's kind of what I was saying now, just real quick. It's just This is for my planting list that I generally do. It's just the number, the street name, the cross street, and I just have 2 designations, NOU, no overhead utilities, or OU. I could just make it an N and an O, but it just is a way to do it. The species that I'm going to select there, and whether they're planting pits. And the planting pit is specific because those are just the cutouts in sidewalks, more in commercial areas. This is something that really would help save a lot of problems and be able to filter where not to put a tree. And I know when you call for a mark out, it's always gas and water. And sometimes there's the disclaimer that says any other utility, you must call that utility or your township on top of that. Does anybody have that process in place for marking sewer lines in their town at all?
Yeah.
Do you?
Well, yeah, I used to work for the city of Ithaca, and the water and sewer department would go out and mark out. They had a team just like the folks who...
All right, so that was part of the ordinance process that was set up at some point.
They would be, yeah, so they would be notified when you called Big Safe, New York.
Okay, so in a situation then, say you just have a 50-foot frontage and you've got water, gas, and the sewer, and somebody wanted a tree, would you say no?
I didn't know.
Well, that's kind of what my point is. So having this other piece of information may be able to help stop that crazy issue that we were talking about a little earlier with having to put, a root reduction material in there to help manage that. Okay. Here's another one that is becoming a really important part of planting. Problem is everybody wants native. I spec'd for a lot of native trees. I went over to tag the trees. They don't have them. What do? You have to kind of find other things very similar. Okay. There are a lot of oaks, but there's only so many native oaks. So I end up getting an oak because of the benefits of the caterpillars and the acorns and things like that. Sometimes you get force. So when I see this native or non-native issue, I kind of just put my hands up in the air and move on, because sometimes it's great on concept. It really is, if you can get them, or you have a system set up with your purchasing department where you can get exactly what you want. When you get stuck with the low bidder, sometimes you have your hands tied. Okay, so we're getting some trees planted now. We're getting started. You got to be really careful with your contractors, because here we have a tree that's designed to be under wires, because here's the service drop coming in here, and then the service drop for this house is right here. Look at it though. I was going to ask him if he could put it any closer to the sidewalk, because it's not in the middle. Again, you got to be careful there's a reason for low bid for a lot of things. These are the kinds of things, and sometimes if you're not there watching every tree, it's kind of tough to go back and fix that. The township of Montclair has one of the astronauts that went to the moon. What was it? Buzz Aldrin, Anyway, he would always joke at the cocktail parties that I can't believe I flew back to the moon and back on the lowest bid contractors for the Saturn V. So here again, it's not just the power lines, it's this. These are the kinds of situations that are going to cause people to say, why is the squirrel coming into my house? Well, that's because of it. And it looks like, again, if you moved the tree 2 feet over to here, you may be able to fix that, but then there's the driveway apron right there. So it's like a catch-22. So sometimes it's really tough to tell people you really shouldn't have a tree. But you have to keep everybody happy, because otherwise these kinds of things happen. And everybody's seen that. And I'm going to ask, if you're sleeping and wake up, if you partially open up your eyes, this looks focused. I'm sorry for the bad copy of it. Okay. This one I thought was funny because they angled it on back towards the wires. Key selection here. Got to be really careful. This is going to be a real big problem in 70 or 80 years because of the gas line there. That is a gas lantern. Some towns have them. So it looks good from a spacing standpoint, but again, the right tree in the right place. So that's about it with the planning, because I can't really get involved with too many details of everything that we're talking about here today. I use on my laptop the ISA risk handout that is on their website. So if you go to treesaregood.org, there is a link for a resource, and it gives some photographs and a great diagram of things to look for. So when people are saying, well, this tree it's got to come down, it's really hazardous, you go over there and take a look at it, and maybe one of these things is on the list, or they've had somebody else come over and take a look at it. This is where we get involved with the track. You hear the tree risk assessment portion of the qualifications for an ISA arborist that can come in handy. But this is kind of the basic that you can use to be able to, when you're walking around, use some of these. This is online, so you don't have to copy all these down. Okay. And will make your job a lot easier, and it'll give you confidence when you're walking around making notes and taking inspections and talking to residents. One thing with defects, a lot of times you won't see them from the street. You got to get out of the car and go around and look, because this tree looked like it was in great shape until you turn around and see the seam in the back. This one too, I pulled up in my car. There's nothing wrong with it. It's got a little bit of a lean. But as soon as you get out of the car, you see the cambium's gone. So you got to get out of the car and take a look. You can't do drive-bys. It's easy to do drive-bys when the tree's dead or you're looking for an ash or skeletons in the sky, but that's not going to work, because if that had broken and it had a target, you could be liable. Luckily, it was not a very large maple, but still, you got to get out and take a look. Sometimes you can't get to holes to see them. This one happened to be low. Remember that one stick? This is the Biltmore stick. It's 36 inches. I have the tennis ball there because a lot of times I'll use it as kind of a little cane, because I had my hips replaced a couple years ago, so this was actually one of my walking canes for a while when I was getting out to look at things. Again there, check it out. Go out and, even if you just find a stick on the ground, stick it in there. If it goes in, then maybe get a tape measure or a yardstick and see if it warrants any more inspection. The other day, I'm out and I'm marking a location for a tree, and I hear a snap. This is a delivery truck that, normally when you see a truck do this, they usually just beeline it right out. They're gone. Well, the guy had to open up the door and deliver the refrigerator first. I'm like, you can't make this up. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to drive around the block and see what happens. I came back about 10 minutes later. You would think they would take this limb and just put it on the curb and drag it away, or put it on the curb. No, they broke it up and put it in the back of the truck. I couldn't believe it. This just happened like 6 weeks ago. Yeah. So that took care of some elevation issues on this particular street. This is Claremont Avenue in Montclair. And then, of course, with the planning, that may be another thing that, we're talking about dead trees or looking at things that you need to put on your inventory to be able to say, hey, gee, this is an issue, and maybe we should have our arborists take a look at, or all the different kinds of fungi and decay issues going on here. Other than just the fungi on the bottom, what is the other noticeable thing that is very stand out in this photograph that would make this tree kind of a red flag? Something basic. There's no flare. There's no root flare, okay? Not at all. It's like a telephone. Anytime you see a telephone pole going into the ground, it's a red flag. Or you see bleeding. Or this was something that my mallet helped out with. I thought this was interesting because people were concerned about a leaning tree. One's leaning this way. What do? You can't do anything about it. Chances are those trees will stay there another 25, 30 years. I'm not worried about it because they're not seeing any There's a little bit of sidewalk lift. Okay, and again, going back to, remember that picture with the gas light? That's the same kind of planting belt, so you got to be really careful. This is probably my favorite because somebody actually went out of the way to put macadam around the tree when it was, 20 years ago or so. After the trees go in, this is kind of something that really bothered me because when I first started, I was taking photographs of these are trees planted before my tenure. And a lot of the planting contracts, you should try to set up that the contractor goes back the following year and takes these structures off. Sometimes, if you're only doing 25 trees, you may want to just do it yourself because those stakes make really good firewood. They make really good firewood. I've got pictures of the back of my Honda loaded with them. I go home with a chop saw and they make really good fire pit firewood, especially the cedar, because the cedar you get a nice snapping noise. Because if you don't, what ends up happening in this situation is you'll start getting crazy sprouting because nobody went back to kind of do a basic first go around safety prune and just take the one codominant out or the one low branch that may poke somebody in the eye. But that's the thing that bugs me. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. And it's pretty amazing, though, when trees are this age, how quickly they can recover from this. They really can. You can go back in 2 years, and if the tree doesn't die, you may just see just a light ring. It's amazing how it can take and grow and compartmentalize new wood around that. It's amazing how resilient trees can adapt to the curveballs that we throw at them. That's another one that is a pretty easy fix. A lot of people don't want to deal with it. It's really tough to do. I burned through 2 leather gloves with a grinder fixing that one. It's not as great as maybe, because sometimes you can't, once they're girdled like that, a lot of times you can't get the grates off to take them and cut them because they're so pinched depending on how much the trunk wood is girdled into the over the grate itself. But that's what it looks like done. And I don't know if you can see, you can see a little bit of swelling. It's pretty amazing. Sometimes you'll actually even see dirt. If it's in compacted soil and you go to do a root collar, you'll see the trunk and then the indentation where when the tree is trying to send its carbs back down to the roots to store for the wintertime, it actually girdles the tree. And finally, on a fun note, this is another really nice part of the job is Arbor Day and fishing. So I love to fish. So like I said, I don't think there were any graphs in there or no bullet points and things like that. I want to try to, it's important to show pictures because the daily grind of a lot of what I think a lot of you folks probably see can be fixed. But again, if it's not planned properly or you don't document it or you don't have a way of being able to track the information through inventories and having good Excel spreadsheets. I see a lot of folks were working on spreadsheets today from further inspections and things. So that's all I got. Anybody have any questions? How are we doing with time? Oh, not too bad. Good. Yes?
Have you had any experience with recycled plastic tree grates?
No, I've never had a planning project involved with any of those yet. I would imagine they're probably as strong or as sturdy. The only thing that I was wondering, how do you cut them? Because a lot of plastics, if you don't have some kind of cooling mechanism, you can actually kind of get the plastic to melt. Any other questions? Yep, over in the back corner. Yeah, okay.
2 questions. The first one about sidewalks. I know, in our municipality, we do not have a program, but it seems like a lot of other municipalities do. Have you worked with any municipality that has a program?
Yes. Montclair has a program where the bonded mason contractors that file for a sidewalk replacement permit, what they have to do is they have to remove the slabs. There's 2 different kinds of sidewalks. They have slate slabs, which are really great to work with because you can just lift them up and use stone dust and kind of ramp them. You don't have to re-pour. But if it's a concrete slab, you actually have to take it out. And then generally what ends up happening is the shade tree foreman during the course of the week goes by and looks at some roots you can shave. But we have all seen some of these presentations this week that you can't take the bottom half of 40% of the flare out on the one side to make room. That's really where then the town makes the decision to take the tree down if it's not going to be viable to grind the roots. Because remember that one tree that got taken down and somebody put a sign saying, hey, could you please take care of the roots underneath my sidewalk, because they didn't want to deal with it. That town does not have a sidewalk replacement system in place. So it's really important to have it part of your ordinance.
They want the town to pay for it. In some municipalities do have a program, like maybe once a year a contractor will come in and they'll split half the cost of the revenue.
Well, that's assuming.
Can I just
Yes,
repeat
good.
that so everyone
Yes.
can hear it?
Yeah.
The question was about cost share programs, right? So to have the municipality pay in and then the resident share. So
Yes, I was aware that there were some grant monies available where that was the case, because Bloomfield was able to get a hold of that and be able to help. But I believe most towns, it's the homeowner's responsibility. I think New York City is the only town in the country that actually bit the bullet and says, we're going to take care of it all. I don't know if that's still in effect, but that was what Mayor de Blasio had instituted, I had heard a couple of years ago. Yes, sir.
As a municipality,
Okay.
how do you deal with county and state roads and the trees that are on those when a resident is on a county road, for instance?
Okay, I got that. Yeah, the question is as a municipality, how do tree issues that are along county and state right-of-ways are dealt with? If it's something that is an emergency, we'll contact either the county or the state. It's generally the county, because I think we've got 4 roads in Montclair, and like Bloomfield Avenue is a county road, and Valley Road and things like that. The Essex County has actually been very cooperative when there's a tree that's dead to come in. So people don't understand it. Sometimes they don't get it, but once you explain it to them, that's county right away, because it's frustrating to see trees that were planted 3 or 4 years ago that are still dead that the county hasn't dealt with. And from that standpoint, when I'm only there, 5 or 6 hours a week, I really have to deal with, public safety issues. So if there's a dead oak that's dropping limbs, I will certainly contact them.
My other question was the Root Act regarding the roots in the sewer system. To me, like if you're giving them now like that Root Act, it's still not going to fix the problem, right? And then here it is, you're giving them something that's fixing a private property pipe, right? It's their sewer line. And then is it deterring them from ever fixing it?
It's kicking.
so can you repeat the question?
Yeah, it sounds, the question was with the program with Root X to be able to deal with the root issues. I'm sorry, I know the answer I want to tell you. Mm-hmm. Right. I think they're doing it as an olive branch. The question is if it's the homeowner's responsibility, why is the town now kind of helping out by giving some Root X? Because what they're doing is they understand that there's a cost. Root X, if you do some research online, it actually has some pretty good data in helping to reduce these issues. Again, it's kicking the can down the road. I remember seeing a presentation, I think it was the League of Municipalities a couple years ago. There's companies now that can actually sleeve the inside of these old systems with a epoxy impregnated fiberglass sleeve, and it dries rock hard, and it's impervious, because then there's no seams in the issue of the roots. The only problem I think now is because sewer lines now increased, so like on a new home, I'm not sure if it's a 6 or an 8, I'm not a plumber, but when you put something inside a pipe, it restricts the flow just that much. So instead of being a 4-inch line, it's now a 3 7/8 or however thick, I'm not sure. but that's about, I think, the only trade-off. But again, that's a really good opportunity. Because also there's that same kind of system with sidewalks. You can actually inject holes in sidewalks and raise slabs with a pressure foam. I had it done at my house because I had a concrete slab that kind of crushed down below my step landing, and it works great. So there are a lot of other alternatives, and I'd love to get some of these folks here as, you know, maybe possible presenters to talk about some other alternatives somewhere down the road. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope everybody has a safe ride home.